Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Henry Daas, who's the founder of Daas Knowledge. Henry, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Hey, welcome. I'm looking forward to talking with you. Before we get started into the focus of your business, give us a little bit of your background and then your entrepreneurial journey.
So I am a serial entrepreneur. I started my first business 30 years ago, 1991, and I've had a series of different businesses in the IT space, the leasing space, factoring, home theater, websites, a whole bunch of stuff. Even built some spec houses back in the day. For the last 10 years, I've been an entrepreneurial coach. So I coach people who are where I was 30 years ago.
Yeah, and I think that probably the one factor within that is you have successes that you could pass on, and then you also have failures and hurdles that you've overcome so that you can show people how to avoid and get past those.
Yeah, I've run the gamut. Great successes and ignominious failures, you name it, and everything in between.
What would you say your biggest success and your biggest failure were that you teach people about?
The most successful business that I had was the leasing company. It was basically a finance business, kind of to a large degree shuffling paperwork around, which was interesting. Plus, my partner handled most of it, so I really liked that part of it as well. That was right in his wheelhouse. Biggest failure I had was when I was in the real estate business and my partner committed suicide and left me kind of holding the bag. It's about 15 years ago. That was a sad chapter that I wrote about in my book.
So on your success with the leasing company, would one of the lessons be to find a partner or find a, maybe like a hire who does the things that you don't prefer to do? Like if you don't like to do the paperwork, find someone that's all they love doing. And then that way that frees up that person or yourself to do what you find is the highest and best use of your time and talent.
That's absolutely 100% my philosophy. For anything that you don't like to do in your entrepreneurial business, there is someone out there, probably many someones out there who eat, sleep, and breathe it, right? So for instance, my wife, who's an entrepreneur, hates to do collections, right? Yet you got to get paid. Yeah. I happen to be very good at collections, and oddly enough, I kind of enjoy doing it. So I get the dubious honor of having to collect on her deadbeat clients, but I've done it for myself as well. I've collected, hundreds of thousands of dollars that people did not want to give me for whatever reason. And it's the same with any other business, but I find that any other aspect of a business. But I find that a lot of entrepreneurs, they feel like they got to roll up their sleeves and become an expert on every little thing that there is. It's like there aren't enough hours in the day to do that. Find skilled people, hire them. If they don't work out, find somebody else.
And of course, that statement sounds extremely simple. Find skilled people, hire them, right? But there's a lot that goes under each one. So what would be like the 30,000-foot view recommendation that you would give on where do you find the best people? And then what are a couple tips on making sure that you vet them well enough so that when you do hire them, that they hit the ground running?
Well, there's an old saying: hire slowly, fire quickly. Yeah. I wrote a little thing. It's a little PDF giveaway that on my website. If you go to www.dasknowledge.com, it's 5 reasons small businesses fail. Not the greatest title because it probably should be more positive, but you know what? What you see is what you get. And the number 2 reason that I believe small businesses fail is hiring. most people suck at hiring. They just they hire the wrong people for the wrong reasons, or they hire for one skill set when they really needed another. In fact, I did this presentation before COVID, and so I asked the people in the audience, tell me about the last hire. It was always, well, a friend of mine had a buddy who does SEO and blah, 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 and how did that work out? I don't think there was a single person who said it worked out well, because they just took the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Right? Where the process is hire slowly, manage expectations. Don't assume because someone did a similar job to yours at another company that they can do it at your company, right? I don't know how many times I've talked to people who say, and I'll ask them, did you train them? Well, no, the guy had a resume, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that doesn't mean anything, right? It means a little bit, but it doesn't mean that they can do the job that you're asking them to do.
And I've heard this when you talk about, let's bring on maybe like a fractional CMO or a virtual assistant kind of a thing, where they go, here's this project, you're going to have 30 days to do it, we're going to assess and just see where we go from there. And that makes sense because you already are kind of a freelance type approach. Could there be anything in the traditional world that would mimic that, in the sense of, look, here's this big project we're working on. We want to bring you on as the full-time, whatever the case is. We want to get you acclimated and see how you do. So bring your A game and let's see where you are in 30 days. We're going to give some training and onboarding. Would that kind of thing work, where it kind of keeps them on their toes? Or do you lose the fact that, maybe they don't feel part of the team because they're not a full hire yet?
Well, I'd take it one step further and say, have a bake-off, right? Hire a couple people.
Oh, nice.
Right, and see who can. I've been involved in bake-offs on the other side, where when I had my home theater business, I was involved in a couple of them, where the customer was comparing and contrasting different vendors. The risk that you run is someone will say, I'm just not going to do that, right? I have my bona fides. I'm a known entity. I'm not going to do that, right? And you may miss out on a candidate or two who really is qualified, who simply doesn't want to go down that rabbit hole. They're like, you hire me. If it doesn't work out, we'll know it. Usually you'll know very, very quickly. So I can get behind that as well. The bigger problem is where people will just take the referral of a friend, right? Or maybe it's one of their friends, without really doing a whole lot of due diligence, because they've passed that. The first obstacle, like the number one obstacle in sales, is generating trust, right?
Yeah.
Hard to sell someone until you've generated some level of trust, right? And the same thing in hiring. Well, I've got their trust. It's a friend of mine or a friend of a friend. They would never screw me over. It's like, how many times have people said that? And then it doesn't work out. And then to multiply it, now there's a relationship in there. So trying to fire them or kindly let them go, or even just coach them up, becomes problematic. That's why some people, there's an old thing that you don't hire family because you can't fire them, right? Or if you do fire them, there's going to be a ripple effect.
You feel like, I've got two people I'm dealing with. I got to coach up or move on this one person, but then it gets back to my friend, and then there's a strained relationship potentially.
Believe me, my first business partner was my best friend from college. And we had 10 great years and then 2 really bad ones when we broke up the business. I broke up the business. I said, we're done. I sat down. I had the come to Jesus speech with him. That didn't go well because, believe it or not, he was blindsided. And I thought to myself, how on God's green earth could you be blindsided? Right? How could you just not see that this is not working out? I was a little bit dumbfounded, but it's amazing sometimes. People have their blinders on and they just have no idea.
So as a business coach, then, you would want someone that feels like they're in that 2-year window of torture, for instance, like you just described, to reach out to you before you have that meeting with the partner to dissolve things and bring you in to say, okay, let's see what we can fix and polish up. What are some of the things that people should notice ahead of time before it gets too late?
Well, it's funny. The very first coach that I hired back in the 90s was because I wanted to break up with my business partner. And I hadn't done the simple thing of creating a buy-sell agreement when we started. Everything was rosy, beautiful, sunshine, puppy dogs. And then 10 years later, it's not. And I don't have anything to fall back on. So I hired a coach who sort of nursed me through that 2-year process of breaking up my business partnership. And I thought to myself, I should have hired him when I started, because then maybe I wouldn't have gotten to this point.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Nobody hires, people. I'm going to generalize here, but let's just put this. I've said this on podcasts before, but I'll say it again. Here's the phone call I've never received. Hey, Henry, I heard you're a good coach. My business is clicking on all cylinders. Everything's hunky-dory, but I think I need a coach.
Yeah.
Right? That's not what I get. I get, Henry, my business is just, god awful. I want to quit. I want to go back to cubicle world. Help me. I'm drowning. Right? Yeah. Let's try to back up a little bit and work on the problem before it becomes a problem. Right? I often say success is a great deodorant. It really is. I just had a coaching call this morning with a client, and he's been my client for 5 years. He started as $1 million business. He's up to probably going to be 15 this year. But there are problems that are lurking out there in the future that my job, amongst a million other things, is to shine a light on those. Right? Things may be great here, but this stuff is lurking. I'm not saying that these things are going to blow up later, but if, heaven forbid, they do, wouldn't it be nice if we were prepared now? It's not that hard to get prepared ahead of time. You just got to do the work. You know what? I got more important stuff to worry about. It's like, no, you don't. This is really important stuff. Maybe you do. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of, like the client you mentioned that went from one number up to a big number, right? 1 million to 15 or whatnot. That's scaling up. And so there's an old saying, I forget who said it, but it is build capacity in advance of demand. So you don't all of a sudden, poof, flip a switch and have 15 million in revenues from a $1 million level overnight. You grow into that. So what are some things that you recommend when people are going, of course I want to grow? And typically people feel like I want more and more and more of the top line revenue. But in reality, there needs to be, in my opinion, the starting point of let's make sure the foundation is there. And let's make sure there's no leaks. So, you mentioned you built spec houses. I'm sure you wouldn't take just a foundation of a house that's rickety and put a $30 million mansion on it because the foundation wouldn't support it.
No, we'd have to put a new foundation in. But we did take $1 million houses and knock them down, perfectly good houses, and build multi-million dollar houses on them. Because that's generally what people do. Scaling is a real conundrum. People sometimes confuse the idea of scaling versus growing a company. I tend to use the phrases interchangeably, but scaling really means getting an exponential growth on a linear growth of headcount and resources, right? Because scaling up from 1 million to 15 million, as an example, is not going to do you any good if your margins get compressed along the way, right? You're basically just treading water.
Yeah.
So great. So my top line is great, but my margin is a quarter of what it was before, right? When I started my first IT company, that's what we saw over that 10-year period. Was we saw margin compression, and that was the nature of the computer business. I saw the handwriting on the wall. I'm sorry to say my business partner didn't. And that was one of the contributing factors to us kind of going our separate ways. He's looking through a microscope at, what's going on right in front of his face. And I'm looking at a telescope that's, months, weeks, months, years down the line. My job as a coach is really to look through that telescope and help the client see that, because they're looking through a microscope. They're there every single day, plowing the fields, looking for this. They can't see the larger strategic picture and the decisions that they have to make. That's my job.
Because sometimes you're too close to the issue and you can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah, like that. I'm the guy up on the Titanic who's looking for the iceberg. Yep. We all know how that ended. So yep. You want to do a better job.
Your book. Give us a little bit of overview of what the book is, and then how can people get a copy?
Oh, so the book is called FQ Financial Intelligence. You can get it for free if you just go to my Daas Knowledge website, click on the FQ tab. Somewhere in there, there's a little tripwire where you can click on a landing page and you can download the book. The actual URL is bookbaby.dasknowledge.com, and you get a coupon for 100% off. I can't do any better than that. And I wrote it actually as a course. It's a 20-week course that I sell, but I give the book away for free because the course itself is based on the book. It was actually, I did it inverse. I wrote the whole thing. I tested it with a dozen people as a course, and I said, okay, I'm ready to go to market. And then a few of my beta testers said, you should make this a book. And so I did that. And I released it, and then I did a whole bunch of events, and then COVID happened. So
yeah.
And it was designed to be, my experience is 40 years of managing my own money. The idea was to teach you in a systematic, methodical way how to grow your assets, how to manage them. I tried to cover every single topic that I could possibly cover. Everything from my tagline is something like from your first savings bond to your last will and testament, and everything in between.
Yep, that about covers it. In fact, my 22-year-old daughter, we just found a couple months ago Series EE savings bond that her grandparents gave her when she was born, and we're like, what do you do with this thing? So it's like, depending on the generation, you take it
still paying interest.
Exactly.
Right? Interest for 30 years. So.
Yeah, it's increased maybe, to $58 rather than $50. But yeah, it's interesting that, people just don't know options out there. So that sounds like a wonderful book. And if anyone is interested in that, I've got the link to your website right in the show notes. So Henry, thank you so much for coming on today. It was really a pleasure talking with you and getting to know your business.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.